Stephen Avery. He is currently serving a life sentence in prison for the murder of Teresa alongside his nephew, Brandon Dassey. A former cellmate by the name of Karl Wernecke brought forward information pertaining to his brief time as a cellmate alongside Mr. Avery. A documentary was made in 2020 pertaining to his commentary. So many things have been said about Mr. Avery, him being innocent, guilty. You're entitled to your opinion. A confession by Joseph W. Evans Jr., 2019, he depicts himself as the killer. He is currently serving life for the murder of his wife, convicted in 2009. Mr. Joseph W. Evans claims he killed Teresa Halbach with his car outside of the Avery property in 2005. He shot her several times, burned her remains, cell phone, and evidence. He was offering up a $100 reward, or asking, I guess, basically someone to bring up a reward so he could bring more information pertaining to what allegedly happened to her by his hands. Now, many believe his commentary, his confession, has many contradictions. Both he and Mr. Avery were locked up in a secure prison in Boscobel. You're entitled to your opinion if you believe that he is also the killer or the sole killer, the only killer. There's been a documentary made, Making of a Murderer, Netflix. Now we have Convicting of a Murderer, released September 8th. First 2 episodes free. In Convicting of a Murderer, this is a rebuttal to Making of a Murderer, basically saying that what you heard in the first installment on Netflix was not factual information and one-sided, that evidentiary material was left out. Now, the people who made the movie have claimed that they couldn't put everything naturally into the movie, the documentary, because there was so much information pertaining to the case. But naturally, whether you believe that this man was innocent or guilty, the right thing to do is to portray everything that was said during trial, and all evidentiary material and testimony should have been allowed in the documentary. The latest update came from August of 2023 pertaining to Mr. Avery. The appeals court denied him a new trial. His attorney, Ms. Zellner, believes that Bobby Dassey is the killer. A tow truck driver came forward in May of this year, May 10th, 2023, that he says that he and a young man or male, Mr. Mike, who's no longer alive, conveniently, saw Bobby Dassey driving Miss Halbach's car a couple of days after she went missing, and that Mr. Stephen Avery was not the passenger in the car. He also claims that he has had no major relationship with Mr. Avery, maybe seen him in passing at McDonald's, dropped a few cars off at his tow yard, but no significant relationship. He also has had run-ins with the law, battery of, I believe, a girlfriend or wife, has been incarcerated for abuse. And once again, his alleged witness of Mr. Bobby Dassey in Halbach's car, he is not alive today. And as I said, how convenient. This information is by Tubi that I'm going to bring to you pertaining to Mr. Karl Wernecke, who was locked up with Stephen Avery. And he believes that Mr. Avery was made into a killer. You're entitled to believe your opinion of Making of a Murderer, Convicting of a Murderer, Mr. Avery's involvement in the murder of Teresa Halbach, and also the nephew, Brandon Dassey. And this other nephew, who his attorney believes is the sole killer, he's also a nephew, Bobby Dassey, and he testified for the the prosecution. Is it possible that all these people were involved in the killing and the knowledge of Teresa Halbach? We get information that she had been to this place before, taking photos of his cars, and that he summons for her particularly, asks the paper to have her come photograph the cars for the leaflet. Had he become infatuated, obsessed with her? Is this someone he wanted to murder? Had he planned this out to kill Teresa, or he was just wanting somebody to kill and he picked her? But it seems strange that a man would live in a community, has the desire to murder, he would pick some random photographer to murder. Here is Mr. Karl Wernecke's version of his time spent in prison with Mr. Avery and what he allegedly told him about the night Teresa Halbach was murdered. Thank you for joining me. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $BeGanji 129 Cash App. Stickers and chats are always welcome during the live stream. Thank you for your time.
In 1985, a Wisconsin man is wrongly convicted of rape.
Stephen Avery, she believed, was her attacker.
Oh, I would gut punch that bitch, a saying he would use. I would just slam her down.
With regard to the charge of first-degree sexual assault, guilty.
And sent to prison for 18 years, where his friend and former cellmate, Karl Wernecke, says Avery would watch hours and hours of crime television.
The bitch and deserves are his two favorite words while watching that. The bitch deserved that. She shouldn't have done that. I'd kill the bitch too.
After he was exonerated by DNA evidence, Stephen Avery was allowed to go home.
They had nothing set up for him, no counseling, no let's get you back into society. They just throw you to the wolves.
Soon after, a pretty young photographer was sadistically butchered. Her remains and vehicle found on Stephen Avery's property.
It was the worst day of my life.
He got to the point to where something was too much and he acted on what he thought he was going to get away with. But all them years in prison, it's just like going to murder school.
A jury sent him back to prison. But could the legal system have gotten it wrong again, as Avery's supporters believe? His cellmate Karl Wernecke thinks not, and that Avery did, in fact, commit the unspeakable crime.
I saw it on the news. Stephen Avery, under arrest for murder. Are you kidding me? No way. And then once I started hearing more and more, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, these are things we talked about while he was in prison.
Stephen Avery's closest prison confidant walks through what he believes, and the evidence shows, happened that terrible Halloween night.
He didn't want to shoot somebody. He didn't want to stab somebody. He physically wanted, get his hands on that person.
And Karl reveals shocking details that Stephen Avery's supporters don't want you to hear.
Making a murderer really manipulated the truth. Somebody that just loses it and goes over the edge, there's no telling what they'll do.
For the first time, Karl Wernecke reveals details that led him to believe Stephen Avery formed the mind of a murderer behind prison walls.
I do believe 100% that he is guilty. And whether people believe me or not, I don't care, because at the end of the day, I know what the truth is. He's an evil person that was created into a monster. It's unacceptable what he did.
In 2015, Netflix released the documentary series Making a Murderer, and the crime saga of Stephen Avery quickly became a worldwide sensation. It tells the story of a man falsely imprisoned for 18 years, his exoneration, and then shocking conviction for the murder of 25-year-old photographer Teresa Halbach.
It was the first time that a man freed by the Innocence Project was later charged with murder.
The highly rated series outraged viewers and generated a groundswell of support for Avery. Over 500,000 people signed a petition to pardon him, believing Avery was framed and wrongfully convicted for a second time. But now, the man who shared a prison cell with Stephen Avery reveals why he believes Avery is indeed Teresa Halbach's killer.
The darkest thoughts he came up with is that you can never kill somebody you know.
Karl Wernecke breaks down in detail why he thinks Stephen Avery's time behind prison walls for a crime he didn't commit turned him into a murderer.
He's mentally strong enough to know I have two choices here. Either I'm going to get away and get my satisfaction and kill this woman and rape her and say, okay, now state we're even, or I'm going to get caught and go back to a place I do feel comfortable and I'm accepted. Now he's a murderer.
In 1986, Stephen Avery was sentenced to 32 years in the Walpin Correctional Institution. Due to overcrowding, many Wisconsin prisoners, including Avery and Karl Wernecke, were moved to different locations.
I met Stephen Avery in Tennessee. We were sent out of state to a private prison there.
Once the Wisconsin inmates were transported to Tennessee, the guards allegedly told them to choose their own cellmate.
So Avery had come over to me and says, hey, come on in my cell. So that's how I first met him. I think because he saw the lonerness, because I didn't have family, nobody wrote me, I didn't make phone calls, nobody visited me, and it was the same boat he was in from being accused of the first crime he was in for, that he didn't get letters, he didn't get mail, so he thought maybe we could click on that level. We got along great. I mean, never got in the argument. He was very, open with all his stuff. Go ahead and watch TV, shared his canteen food with me, because over the years of him being in, he has money saved up from doing prison jobs and stuff like that. So he had, along the way, purchased a TV and fan and stuff like that. So we had some amenities in our room.
The friends were separated when Karl was transferred back to a prison in his home state.
I was sent back to Stanley, Wisconsin before Avery was sent back from Tennessee.
After a while, Karl found out that his former Tennessee cellmate would be joining him.
The unit I was in was where the transfers would come in, and I could see who was on the bus every week of coming in, and I noticed his name on there. So I said, hey, put him in my cell. So I had to go to work, and I left a note, and I said, hey, bitch, get on the top bunk and wait for me to get home from work.
Let me pause here. Now you see how inmates know who is coming onto the property. They're either told or they have knowledge by a piece of paper, which I don't think they should know. I think they should just learn them as the people come in. But as you see, he got a list of who was coming in on a bus to the prison. His old former cellmate. Very interesting.
Because we were close like that. But he didn't know that it was my cell. But then once I got to work, I thought, oh, what if it's a different Steve Avery? And the B word can get you in a lot of trouble. But I figured it's got to be by the odds of it. So when I got back from work and stuff, he was in my cell and he saw it was me and he laughed. He was like, I was wondering what the heck was this? And then I got him in my cell there.
Karl Wernecke had been in and out of prison for a combined 14 years.
All the times I got arrested, it's for burglaries, theft, and armed robberies. Yeah. And it's not like you just break the law and go to prison. I was guilty. Give me my time and let's do this and get it over with.
Karl says he's been on the straight and narrow since his release from prison in 2004.
My life now is really good. I haven't drank in over a year now. I have a steady job. I've got a good income. I've got a girlfriend and a household and bills to pay. I mean, it's nice to have my feet settled in.
Like Karl.
This documentary information was 3 years ago. Is he still on the up and straight and narrow, Mr. Wernecke?
Karl, Stephen Avery also had multiple run-ins with the law.
He was just a rural troublemaker, very well known to the law enforcement community, especially the sheriff's department.
Some of Avery's offenses were dark. At 20, he was convicted of animal cruelty in a case involving a cat that was burned alive.
Normal people don't torture that family pet. They just don't do it. The family pet is off limits. They don't do stuff like that.
Avery's depraved acts escalated when he exposed himself to his cousin Sandra a year later. Not long after, he attempted to run his cousin off the road while her child was in the vehicle. In fact, Stephen was convicted of that crime, and 6 of the 18 years that he served on the wrongful conviction were actually rightfully served because of that conviction for the prior crime.
That was January 1985.
It is while Avery is out on bail and awaiting trial for the roadside assault that an event takes place which forever changed the course of Avery's life. July 1985, not far from Manitowoc, Wisconsin, where Stephen Avery lived, 36-year-old Penny Ann Burnson was jogging alone along the Lake Michigan shoreline. She noticed a person ahead of her who disturbed her, and she could tell he was up to no good. He dragged her over sand dunes and ended up brutally assaulting Penny. The attacker was armed with a knife. He led Penny into the woods, where he savagely beat and sexually assaulted her. At the hospital, Burnson described her attacker as a scraggly-haired man in a leather jacket. Authorities had a description of a man who fit Stephen Avery. Plus, Avery had a bad reputation in Manitowoc. And when the victim, Penny Burnson, picked out Avery in the lineup, his fate was virtually sealed. From then, the case took on its own course. Penny, in her mind after that point, that was her assailant.
Prisoner will please rise.
Although Stephen Avery maintained his innocence.
The verdict of the jury with regard to the charge of first-degree sexual assault, guilty. With regard to the charge,
He was found guilty of first-degree sexual assault, false imprisonment, and attempted first-degree murder.
guilty. The bailiff will remand the prisoner to the custody of the Wisconsin Department of Corrections.
They talked to his family, and it looked like, hey, he really had a good alibi. So when the verdict comes down as guilty, we were kind of, wow. You really thought they had proven their case, but the jury didn't buy it. So, hey, jury of your peers, you're gone.
In 1986, 23-year-old Stephen Avery was sentenced to 32 years in prison for a crime he insisted he did not commit.
The cell was a regular 6x8 cell, two bunks in it, and a toilet and a sink. Neither of us played cards or gambled, so we'd just sit in the room most of the time and watch TV. He never went outside. He wasn't into any athletics or anything like that. He would just stay in, watch his TV.
According to Karl, Stephen Avery would become unraveled when others interfered with his TV time.
The crazy little troll is what a lot of them would call him. When he'd get mad, he would turn very red because of his very white skin from never going outside. And he'd start clenching his fists, and he's got big for him. He's a strong boy. He's a strong boy. He came off as a little unpredictable because some days he would just be the quiet Steve that would get his food, eat, and go back to the room. Some days he would draw attention out in the day room, and if you do the littlest thing can set him off. Just straight irate, 0 to 100. Not much you can do with anger in prison except get more trouble. And he's like, well, what are they going to do? What are they going to throw me in the hole? So and a person that's not afraid of going to the hole is somebody that's not afraid of doing just about anything. And that.
With this information by Mr. Karl Wernecke, do you believe the version he is giving? Did this man, Mr. Avery, have outburst in prison? Did the state, whoever did the lab work, was it done right? Because what you have to ask yourself is, why would a person serve many years in prison for a crime allegedly he didn't commit, exonerated by DNA and the Innocence Project, to only come out of prison, win an award from the state for wrongful conviction, awarded money, start dating? We also hear that he was abusive to that lady. She has brought testimony that he was very abusive to her. I'll bring that at a later date. To then murder a young photographer for local leaflet. Did he kill Teresa Harbeck? Did he have help? Was Brandon a part of this plot to kidnap and murder a young lady, cover it up? Was the other nephew, Bobby, involved or had knowledge of the murder? Who all knew about the murder, helped cover it up? And if indeed this man saw signs of him escalating in prison, could it be possible that he did kidnap that lady, murder her? What is the universe telling us? Or he didn't kill that lady, attempt to murder that lady, sexually assault that lady, got exonerated, but, as this former cellmate says, he was groomed. He focused on TV life, fantasy life, already had some hangups, burning animals, violent, angry, sexual deviances, exposing himself to his own cousin, very sick, approaching her with a gun, threatening her. This is how he got the first sentence, to be incarcerated alongside the alleged rape, kidnapping, and assault of a woman. So did he already have jacked up tendencies and ways, but didn't assault that lady that he got convicted of? But sitting in the prison, he became angry. And we've heard this from many men who have been in prison for crimes they did commit, that when they got out, they were a wrecking ball. They wreaked more havoc once released from prison. And we have learned this with many cases, true crime, that when the men are released, they make sure not to leave a victim. And this is very known with serial rapists. I've been interrogated, but not arrested. I've been interrogated, then arrested. I did my time. Now I'm out. I'm angry and mad. I still have these deviances, these dirty desires, and I will not leave a witness. This is how serial rapists become killers. So was he groomed from being locked up so many years, angry, mad at the world for wrongful conviction, and then became a murderer?
That keeps a lot of people in prison away from you that could harm you physically. You don't mess with crazy. It's just a rule in prison. Don't mess with crazy.
Stephen Avery continued to maintain that he had been falsely accused of rape, and Karl began to notice Avery's increasing hostility, especially for women in TV crime shows.
He did seem to like the crimes more that were against females. You could see the grit of the teeth, like, yeah, that's what she gets. If it was like she cheated on her husband, we didn't care. She's gonna get it.
Did prison life and TV shows teach the star of Making a Murderer how to get away with murder?
It got me to wonder, is this really just anger, or is this a time bomb? And I fear the wrath if it does explode.
In 1986, Stephen Avery was sentenced to prison for 32 years, convicted of raping and assaulting Penny Burnson while she jogged near Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
To the charge of first-degree sexual assault, guilty.
Fighting for his innocence, Stephen Avery requested to have the scrapings taken from under Penny's fingernails tested against his DNA.
You hear it daily in there. It wasn't me, you know what I mean? And he had made a comment that if I was gonna rape somebody, it wouldn't be an ugly old lady like that. That's kind of like saying that I would go do that again. And that struck me as odd that he made that comment when he's saying I'm innocent. It struck me as an odd comment to make.
As the years passed, prison became an incubator for Avery's anger, resentment, and according to Karl and fellow inmates, dark fantasies.
Yo, man, what you drawing over there?
You don't want to know.
Yeah, dude, what is it? Let me see this, man. And what this is?
It's a torture chamber.
A torture chamber? For what?
What do you think? For women.
For women. For what? So you can rape them?
In prison, he developed a real hatred of women. This is a person that prison made even worse than when he went in. Karl Wernecke believes it's because of how Avery spent most of his time behind bars.
They call it TV doing your time. The TV's doing your prison time for you. Because I could spend days on end watching TV and not realize what day of the week it is. And with all them channels, it's just doing your time for you. His interests was CSI Miami's, them type of shows, crime shows, forensic files, anything Dateline, mysteries, or caught on camera.
According to Karl, Avery would describe how he would have done things differently if he were the killer.
He always rooted for the bad guy. He wanted to pick out the things that were wrong. Like, oh, why wouldn't they view that tape from or wasn't there a camera across? He wanted to see how the criminal could get around it. He would tell him, no, don't put her there. They find her there, because he had already seen it. And he's like telling him how to do this crime better, So he wanted to break it down and see how the criminal could have got away with it. The darkest thoughts he came up with is that you can never kill somebody you know. You run the body through a wood chipper and feed him to a bunch of hogs. The hogs will eat up all the evidence, bones and all, and they'd never discover it. It's a pretty dark thought when you can think of throwing somebody through a wood chipper to get rid of the body. So he learned it through watching TV.
The most telling technique for destroying DNA that Stephen Avery offered up would become a major part of his future murder case.
From what we saw in every episode that we watched, the hardest time they ever had finding any proof of wrongdoings is when something was burned. And the times they couldn't find it in the fire, it was because it was burned at such extreme heats that it even ruined normal DNA you could get out of a wood fire in your backyard. The extreme heat was the key. And that was the thing he would key on. Burning, burning, burning. It got him off the wood chipper and feeding it to the hogs.
All the while, Stephen Avery continued to fight for his release. Finally, the Wisconsin Innocence Project took on Stephen Avery's cause and requested permission to conduct new DNA testing based on scientific advancements that had been made. When the judge approved the request, Avery confided in his friend.
He says, wow, I'm getting my chance. They're doing DNA on a hair, and that's the first I had heard of it. And that's when he explained to me that the Innocent Project had picked up his case, and it started dawning on me, like, I could actually be in prison with somebody innocent? No way. I was just in awe that something could really happen like that.
The Wisconsin State Crime Lab tested 13 hairs recovered from the victim he was accused of raping. None matched Stephen Avery. One of the hairs belonged to a man named Gregory Allen, who was already serving a 60-year sentence for a rape he committed in Brown County.
We determined that it was very clear that Mr. Avery was wrongly convicted and that he had to be released forthwith.
The day he was leaving, I saw him before I was going to work and stuff, and I told him goodbye and see you later, and he gave me his address and phone number, and he knew I had nowhere to go. He's like, why don't you come down if you want to? We can get you a job. I got a place you can stay. He said, it's just a little trailer in the middle of nowhere and, stuff. So we left on, great terms, and then he says, oh, yeah, here, and he packed up all his canteen and everything, and he said, you can have this. And in there, that was just huge, just a huge treat to get right there,
On September 11th, 2003, Avery was freed after spending 18 years in prison for a rape he did not commit.
In a scene that people in Wisconsin will remember well, he walked out of prison in the midst of media cameras and reporters from all over the state.
Now, when you look at the photo video of Mr. Avery, he was bald-headed with a beard. That is what he's looking like now. Bearded now, more facial hair. Very interesting. 18 years inside for a crime he did not commit. Hairs belonging to another man who had been convicted of rape and serving a 60-year sentence. But did the 18 years corrupt this man who already had some deviant behavior? It's not like he was just a regular old guy working a job with no criminal background, no criminal record, and then was found guilty of assault and rape. But he did have deviances, burning an animal, pulling an assault rifle out on his own relative after exposing himself to her, which shows that he's sick. He had sick ways even then. And then you also have to wonder, did he ever commit any crimes against women or men, boys or girls, but nobody ever told? It's just a thought. But 18 years inside could corrupt anyone worse than they went in, whether they were a first-time offender of a crime or not. 18 years. Did prison build a monster?
Stephen Avery became sort of a folk hero in the state of Wisconsin, the poster child for the Wisconsin Innocence Project.
In wrongful incarceration, what we see is them being happy upon being released. You know, we see these guys, I'm just happy to be out, but we don't see them next year and the year after that, and what they're going through from that experience.
They had nothing set up for him, no counseling, no let's get you back into society, nothing, or if they did, he didn't accept it. But they just throw you to the wolves. They just leave you, let you go. And that will kick anger. It made me angry. It made me angry at the whole system, the whole, judicial system.
Back in society, Avery moved into a trailer on the family.
Let me interject. Angry. This man says he was angry. Why would you be angry? You admit that you did wrong. You're burglarizing people. You own that you did this. So why would you be angry? Very interesting. Mr. Avery was innocent, allegedly. But 18 years is a mighty long time. And as you hear this man saying, he became obsessed with TV crime shows, and always rooted for the villain, and appeared to not like women very well. And of course, he wouldn't after being in there because of an alleged assault against a woman. So he came to hate women, obviously. And possibly he did not like women even before going into prison. You see, one thing begets another, as I've always said with true crime. That possibly he was a killer in the making. Could have been from birth, genetics, child rearing, behavior that was not appropriate. Misidentified as a perpetrator, sentenced to 18 years. Organization helps him get out, but by then he's already defunct, warped, a wrecking ball.
Family property with his new girlfriend, Jody Stikowski. He also began working at the family's local salvage yard.
Didn't really have a job. I mean, he would kind of work around the family auto salvage yard, but that was a well-functioning business, and his father and his brothers were running, so I think he sort of felt not sure how to fit in exactly.
After his release from prison, Stephen Avery filed a $36 million wrongful conviction lawsuit against Manitowoc County, its former district attorney, and the former sheriff, who were, as Mr. Avery and his lawyers allege, responsible for his wrongful conviction.
Meanwhile, Stephen Avery's fiancée was arrested for DUI violations and sent to jail for 7 months. She would later tell TV host Nancy Grace that Avery was abusive and that he once said that all women owe him because of the one that sent him to prison the first time. A steady rage grew inside Stephen Avery, the question being, how would it manifest itself? On October 10th, 2005, a staffer from Auto Trader magazine was called to Avery's property to take vehicle photos. Karl Wernecke says the magazine was a favorite of Avery's when he was incarcerated.
He always had the Auto Trader magazines. He always had them. He had a subscription to it. He would just always be looking at cars in there, old vintage cars and stuff like that. That was the only mail he'd get, is the Auto Trader magazine.
25-year-old Teresa Hallbach was the photographer that day.
If you were going to sell a car, she would come to your house or your business, take pictures of it that would be placed in Auto Trader and used as part of the ads.
She became a very good photographer, and she enjoyed it, and she had that passion for it.
She had been to the Avery property at least a handful of times before, because being that it was a salvage yard, and had met Stephen Avery on at least a couple of occasions.
Hey! Would releasing Stephen Avery prove to be a fatal mistake?
He just snapped, in no way. He has no tools to deal with his anger issues. And he took it out on what ended up putting him in prison, which was a female.
This is where business is, where clouds...
Sorry about that brief intermission. Very scary. Very, very scary. A woman puts him in prison. He's released. Now he's mad at women. Was he abusive to the girlfriend? She alleges that he was. I'll bring that commentary later, as I said, during another live stream. Very, very scary. You don't know people, that's the point. You don't know people. Thank you for joining me, everybody. Brief intermission. I didn't think it had any commercials, but it did. Hope you all are well out there. Hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Please be safe and aware of your surroundings when you're out shopping. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Vault XL.
Wrongful 18-year prison incarceration for a crime he didn't commit, his exoneration, and his subsequent conviction for the murder of Teresa Halbach 2 years later. But many believe that Stephen Avery was innocent yet again, and he was framed for Teresa's murder in retaliation for suing the Wisconsin Police Department. But Avery's cellmate during his first prison stint, Karl Wernecke, thinks differently.
To me, it's like he had a vendetta. Now I'm going to go out and commit a crime. And now let's see you catch me on this one. I gave you 18 years for nothing. Kiss my ass, come catch me.
On October 10th, 2005, Auto Trader magazine photographer Teresa Halbach was called to Stephen Avery's place to take photos of vehicles for sale. According to friends, Teresa felt uneasy about Avery answering the door in a towel and asking her to come in.
Wow.
You want to come in for a sec while I get dressed?
No. If you just want to point it out, I can go get the picture.
Oh, no. Give me just a minute. She was frightened about it, and we talked, and I even told her a couple of times, if you have to go back there, let me know and I'll go with you. And she said, no, everything will be okay.
But little did
So were there incidents of him talking or behaving inappropriately on other visits? Because if you, as a female, go to someone's residence, you're out in the middle of nowhere, as the former cellie tells you when he was leaving, he told him, you're welcome to come stay. I live in the middle of nowhere. You do have to use precautions going to someone's house, no matter where they live, quite frankly, because it's just rule of thumb. Once the door is closed, all bets are off. So it doesn't really matter if it's an apartment or trailer, condo, where it doesn't matter. Once the door is closed, you're on your own. So I'm wondering if she had issues with him before, because now you have this guy who's a mentor and friend, former friend, older gentleman speaking here, that obviously they've had conversations. They had conversations about her visits out there. So was she so desperate for money that she would risk going somewhere that she did not feel comfortable, number one? How many times total did she go out to that property to take pictures of cars? Big property they had full of cars. I mean, massive amount of cars in the photographs. And number three, a man who has made you feel uncomfortable is standing in front of you with a towel on and says, I'll be right back. This is your cue to run like hell. But we'll never know if that was said or not, because there's only one person living to give that version, and that is Mr. Avery. So he would be the only one that could spin the version of, yes, I was there with a towel. She stood there waited for me. I went and got dressed, came back, met her outside, showed her the car. She took the pictures and she went on her way. See, we don't even know how it went when she got to the door. She was pulled in, shoved in. She went in anyway, whether he was half dressed or fully dressed. See, we don't know because she's not alive to tell the story. So I can't even say what he had on or didn't have on. But nonetheless, she's no longer alive.
Did Teresa know that just a few weeks later on Halloween, her worst nightmare would begin with a phone call?
Auto Trader.
Yeah, my sister has an 89 Dodge minivan to sell.
On the day of Teresa's murder, Stephen Avery called Auto Trader magazine and tricked them into sending Teresa Hallbach back to his home.
Avery's Auto Salvage in Two Rivers.
Will there be somebody there this afternoon?
Yeah, my sister.
Phone records show that Avery also called Teresa's cell phone 3 times that afternoon, twice using the star 67 feature to hide his identity.
Just stalking, luring, and who knows how long, like he had followed her or seen her and before the phone calls get, started and trying
Let's
to block
go back
it
to
off.
this a little bit.
You want to come in for a sec while I get dressed?
No. If you just want to point it out, I can go get the picture.
Oh, no. Give me just a minute.
She was frightened about it, and we talked, and I even told her a couple times, if you have to go back there, let me know and I'll go with you. And she said, no, everything will be okay.
But little did Teresa know that just a few weeks later on Halloween, her worst...
Okay, so I misunderstood that. So he came with the towel on the time before she went missing. So this is why this guy's giving this commentary. If you need to go back, I will go with you. Well, I think protocol should have been, if you believed her version, we will not be doing business with him because that is inappropriate for him to come to the door undressed. See, this is where red flags were going off. Sorry for the discrepancy. He wore the towel the time before she went missing. So this is the one time before she came. So she's uneasy. She talks to this guy, but they should have removed him from their roster of people to do business with. I think that would have been the appropriate thing to do. Well, see, Hippie, that's the whole point of the rebuttal between the two documentaries is that the newest documentary is saying things were not mentioned in the first, and the people who wrote that documentary for Netflix say there was too much for them to mention. That's the whole point of doing a documentary, is to try to bring everything viable to the public pertaining to all parties involved. Brandon, Steve, Ms. Hobbit, her business, how many times she went out there, any incidents of improprieties by he or her or whomever. And I don't think this man is making up anything. He doesn't sound like he's lying. So here we have an incident of him coming to the door in a towel. I guess she waits on him. And then I guess they resume business once he's dressed. And then the next time she goes back out there, she's no longer seen.
Her worst nightmare would begin with a phone call.
Auto Trader.
Yeah, my sister has an 89 Dodge minivan to sell.
On the day of Teresa's murder, Stephen Avery called Auto Trader magazine and tricked them into sending Teresa Hallbach back to his home.
Avery's Auto Salvage in Two Rivers.
Will there be somebody there this afternoon?
Yeah, my sister.
Phone records show that Avery also called Teresa's cell phone 3 times that afternoon, twice using the star 67 feature to hide his identity.
Just stalking, luring, and who knows how long, like he had followed her or seen her and before the phone calls get, started and trying to...
Very interesting. You have Mr. Wernecke saying maybe he stalked her. So what was it about Miss Hallbach? Naturally, he's been out free, had a girlfriend abusing her allegedly. Other women he had just seen in town, around town. Why her? Why Teresa? Younger, of course. Average looking young lady, you know, nothing spectacular, but just an average young dark haired girl, young lady. What was so special about her to where he had to start 67 the number? See, that's a bad sign right there. Deception. You lie to get her out there to say the sister's going to be there because you knew what you did the last time was inappropriate, coming to the door in a towel, Mr. Avery. So I'll get her back out here and make her think she'll be doing business with my sister. But you see, you have to think. I don't like the way he approached me the last time. I'll pass. And that is what she should have told her superior. I did not feel comfortable the last time at Mr. Avery's property. I will not be going back. Who's going to make me go? And that's the point. It's just a leaflet of taking pictures of damn cars. This is why we have to use discretion with dealing with people. When we see the signs, they are not right. They're making inappropriate comments. They're always making derogatory comments, sexual in nature, brushing up against you, groping you, touching you. Run like hell. Don't laugh it off. Get out. Remove yourself. Because truthfully, he could have done something with her then when he was standing there with the towel. Could have just grabbed her and pulled her in. Who's going to say something? As he said to the friend, I live in the middle of nowhere. This is bad. And this is a story that happens every day.
And to block it all and stuff, and thinking that's what you're doing is blocking that number.
With Avery locked behind bars between 1985 and 2003, he had missed many technological advances, as did his cellmate, Karl.
Years of technology passing you by, all you ever see is a cell phone commercial. You've never had a cell phone in your hand. You've never seen one in public, you know? Then you get out and use one. You have no clue how that thing works. I didn't know you could even, if you block a number you're calling from, I didn't know that they knew where you were calling from. He didn't know about towers at the time.
He probably knew that he had frightened Teresa earlier when she showed up. And he greeted her wearing only a towel.
Exactly.
What is definitely known is that Teresa Halbach arrived at the Avery property around 2:30 p.m. on October 31st.
Hey there.
Hi. Is Barb here? I'm here to take pictures of the car.
Barb ain't here right now. I can show you where it is.
Okay.
This way.
Oh, Lordy. How terrible. Why would she go back?
This one.
Okay.
She left me some money to give to you. Come by the trailer when you're done.
Yeah, okay.
See, we don't even know how that went.
Passers-by spotted Teresa taking photographs of the vehicle. It was the last time anyone would see her alive.
That poor girl, you know.
Typically, she would be at the studio about 9 o'clock. 9:30, she wasn't there. 10.
Okay.
Passers-by spotted Teresa taking photographs of the vehicle. It was the last time anyone would see her alive.
Mercy.
That poor girl.
Yes.
You know?
Typically, she would be at the studio about 9 o'clock.
Very
9:30,
creepy.
she wasn't there. 10, 10:30, she wasn't there. I was thinking, well, maybe, got tied up in something and, personal or whatever. So I called and her answering machine was full. And I thought, well, that's odd because it was never full before. Got a hold of her mom and her mom said, well, I drove by and the garage door was open and her car was gone.
Have you seen this woman? An intense search is underway tonight for a missing 25-year-old from Calumet County.
There was coverage of a missing woman that she had last been seen at the Avery place, and it was, whoa, that was coincidental right there, like, what's this all about?
Relatively quickly, authorities determined that Teresa was last seen alive at Avery's salvage yard. On November 5th, volunteer searchers looked desperately for the missing photographer.
Friends and family members of Teresa Halbach had developed a volunteer search party
Teresa Halbach's cousin, Pamela Sturm, and Pam's daughter entered the Avery salvage yard with permission from the owners, and within 20 minutes, they made a startling discovery.
Okay, we are at Avery Salvage. Okay, and we're searching for the vehicle. Right. For Teresa Halbach. We have found a RAV4.
Teresa's SUV was haphazardly hidden within the salvage yard itself.
Police soon confirmed that that was Teresa's vehicle.
If I have a hard-boiled egg, I'm going to hide it from you in a hen house. If I have a car, I'm going to hide it for you on our lot. It's 40 acres of cars.
Yes.
That's where I put it, and the way it looked hidden, it wasn't hidden from somebody walking up on it. But if an airplane was to fly over it, they could tell you every dark-colored car in that lot, but not that piece of plywood he have over the roof. You can't see what color that car is from the air.
Karl came up with a theory based on what he learned about his former cellmate.
He didn't care about the sides of it being exposed. Who's going to walk through 40 acres of cars
Yeah, it's a lot of cars.
They did.
They
I
did.
wouldn't think they would.
Amen.
They did, and that's another where he failed. He's like,
Yes.
doggone, they can't
Yes.
see it from the air. But they walked right up on it.
Police impounded Halbach's SUV and
Great point made by Mr. Wernecke. Stephen didn't think they were going to go through all those cars. But that's the thing. If somebody says, hey, police, I saw that lady standing over there taking pictures, then that's where they're going to go. And when you look at the aerial view from what would be, a plane, drone, it's massive. 40 acres. Just looking at the cars, it looks massive from in the air. Now imagine you're on the ground, scared, worried, looking at all the cars, and you're having to walk up and down the roads looking for a RAV4. That had to be the worst thing. Not knowing what to anticipate. So I'm wondering how many people were actually on foot that day looking, because that's a lot of property to walk. And then when you see the car, you can see what's obvious that somebody was trying to cover it up. You didn't see plywood and branches covering possibly the other cars. Why is this one car of a missing woman having boards and branches, sitting in front of it and the side of it? Because you were trying to hide it because you were up to no good, Mr. Avery.
and took it to the state crime lab in Madison. By the next day, as many as 200 police officers were combing the Avery salvage yard for evidence.
There were media helicopters circling above, watching what was going on below. Police dogs were barking. It was about as eerie a scene as you can imagine.
Eventually, cadaver dogs found what appeared to be a burn pit and a burn barrel near Stephen Avery's trailer. Discovered were pieces of a cell phone, camera, and bits of bone and teeth. Authorities confirmed that they were the remains of Teresa Halbach.
Wow.
Now there's a body in your fire pit with remnants of steel-belted radio tires.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, these are things we talked about, but you'd think you're getting rid of all the evidence.
Exactly.
I would think that.
Narcissist.
The phone, I'm thinking if I burn it, throw it in a burn barrel, they can't get anything off of that phone.
That's where he messed up.
Yeah, they can't.
Everything on his own properties.
I did not know it either.
It officially went from a missing person investigation to an actual homicide investigation.
With Avery's pending lawsuit against Manitowoc County, the DA's office determined there was a conflict of interest and turned the investigation over to a neighboring county. Investigators from Calumet County discovered damning evidence in Teresa Halbach's SUV. Upon a sixth search of Avery's home, Detective James Lenk found the key to Teresa Halbach's RAV4, and it contained Avery's DNA. Curiously, however, it did not contain Teresa's DNA. Is it possible that the key was planted during that sixth search in an effort to frame Stephen Avery? In Karl's opinion, it's not.
It's just a grasp at straws. He was suing them for 18 years of false imprisonment. He would have settled out of court for $500,000. The county loses no money. You really think all this big frame-ups over a little bit of money? They'd be killing people left and right. Why go to all this and you're going to have the whole county in on a framing?
They're setting me up. From the very beginning was kind of his theme.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second. Well, let's just say somebody did put the key back there to frame him. Did they know at the time that the remains belonged to Miss Halbeck? Bingo card. Because while I'm out here investigating, has DNA come back to say, yes, these remains, picture, ID, remnants, camera, excuse me, sorry, belong to her? And what are the odds that a camera, remnants of a camera is burned and you have a missing photographer? Tooth, DNA, bones belong to her. So you can't fight that, whether they found the key back there or not, or you believe the key was planted. The DNA weighs stronger. Anything belonging to her didn't burn all the way. What, 20 feet from his house? That's pretty damning. So how would somebody get on your property in the middle of nowhere and burn up this lady who's been coming to your house to take pictures, but you don't know anything about it and you didn't do it, somebody else did it? Let's stay woke now. And then there's DNA in the car, her car. Blood was found in her car. It's too damning. Even if you want to say they found the truck, and the truck, the key was in it. Okay? Somebody still had to touch the key. So what? The police wiped the prints out and then took the key and then went in your house and then planted the key behind that dresser or whatever. You still can't explain her actual remains being in the fire pit.
Now, Making a Murderer showed the key right on the floor as if it was right there the whole time and that other officers should have found it. But actually, Colburn and Lank testified that when they were in there searching, Colburn had put back some pornography magazines basically into the bookcase. And he was doing it kind of roughly, throwing it in there, when the backing of the bookcase apparently came out of veneer or a particle board. And Stephen Avery had tucked the key behind, in between the particle board and the bookcase. And that is when it fell out.
Okay.
That explanation was never even shown on Making a Murderer on November.
So very interesting. More information that was not released during the Netflix documentary. And they show pictures of the board on the back of that little dresser or stand. You can see it's detached from the actual stand or dresser. So that would make sense. You're in the room, you know, looking through everything, pulling books out, woo-woo. You take the books, throw them back in there, and then it ruffles the back of that board that's not all the way attached. Voila, out is the key. The key comes out. Sounds good to me.
November 15th, 2005, Stephen Avery was charged with first-degree intentional homicide for the murder of Teresa Halbach and mutilation of a corpse. He pleaded not guilty.
I saw it on the news. Stephen Avery, under arrest for murder of a man. I'm like, are you kidding me? No way.
How did Stephen Avery senselessly torture and kill Teresa Halbach? His cellmate reveals the hair-raising secrets that Avery divulged about murder and how to get away with it.
Very scary.
The documentary Making a Murderer was charged with killing Teresa Halbach. Word began to spread about a possible accomplice, his nephew, Brendan Dassey. Police questioned the learning disabled 16-year-old after he told his cousin that he saw a body in Uncle Stephen's fire pit the night of Teresa's murder.
I think it's fair to say that Brendan was very limited in many ways, intellectually limited, and probably very easily manipulated by older people, and he very much looked up to Stephen Avery, his uncle.
Karl has never met Brendan, but he's formulated an opinion based on independent research.
He didn't want to get Stephen in trouble, And when the police told Brendan that we're going to tell your mom what you did, or unless you want to tell her, you go ahead. The first thing that kid did was get on that phone and tell mom how sorry he was.
In what has become a controversial series of interrogations, each of which was elicited without a defense attorney present, Brendan described a depraved murder in graphic detail.
Brendan Dassey provided a horrific account of Teresa's last hour at Stephen Avery's home.
What follows is an account of the crime, based on Brendan Dassey's confession to investigators. A confession he would later recant.
Get him. He wants some action. Come on.
Teresa was naked, bound to the bed, and wearing leg irons.
You just gonna stare all day? Go on then, I already had my turn.
Oh my God, no.
According to 16-year-old Brendan's confession, she was sexually assaulted by him and Stephen Avery.
I honestly believe that Brendan didn't have a clue the magnitude of what was going on there. He thought it was a good thing to do. Uncle Stephen's doing it. I'll help him. Uncle Stephen's always loves it when I help him, you know. He thought he was doing a good thing and get a pat on the back.
Teresa was likely subdued by Avery so that he could move her easily.
He's a stout man, stocky build. We goof around in the cells, you know, once in a while, you know, wrestling around and stuff. He's strong. He's stronger than he looks.
Her SUV had been moved to Avery's garage, out of sight of passersby.
What now?
We'll kill her.
No, please don't. It hurts.
Finish her off.
Brendan was...
So was this boy mentally disabled to where he did not know what he was doing was wrong, assaulting a woman tied to a bed? Because before that, they say he told another relative that he saw a woman in a burn pit. But then it moves from that to him telling the police what he heard and saw and participated in. You also hear that the car was moved to the garage. I'm assuming it was moved to the garage first, out of the way from civilians, then stored on that acreage of the salvage yard. It's very diabolical. This is why it's best to have children interrogated with a parent or an attorney. But maybe nobody assumed this child had any knowledge or was involved. And when you look at him at that time, you wouldn't even think he would be capable of assaulting a woman and going along with murdering her, holding the secret. But eventually he did say something. Hey, there's a lady in that burn pit. And that would lead one to believe that he had some type of mental disability, because you're going to ask yourself, well, if he went along with assaulting her, watching her being murdered, covering it up with the uncle, why would he then go say, hey, oh, by the way, there's a lady in the pit, but leaves out the part, oh yeah, I have sexually assaulted her and kill her too, or aided in the killing. It's wicked to think of it, period. But that's the part that grabbed me, is he went and told somebody he saw a body in the pit, but did he also leave out what he did to the body before it got in the pit? Mercy.
Was somebody he could dominate mentally as well as physically, and would be a yes man to approve him. And Stephen Avery used his criminal knowledge he learned in prison, because every day in there is manipulation.
Who killed her?
Teresa's blood was later found in the rear cargo area of her vehicle.
Okay.
Avery's plan was to crush Teresa's car with her in it.
They could find DNA in the crusher, couldn't they?
To avoid leaving behind forensic evidence, Stephen Avery had another idea.
Maybe we should throw her on the fire. Oh, she don't want to die, Uncle Steve.
They removed her from the cargo area.
She don't want to die. Mercy. Did he say that? Oh, Lord. Oh, was she shot that many times?
I'm sorry you got to see this stuff.
He then disposed of her body in a fire pit and a burn barrel after the fact.
Remember, in prison, Karl said Avery became obsessed with burning evidence.
And that was the thing he would key on. Burning, burning, burning. What's the matter?
Smells bad.
I know. We'll throw some more tires on the fire.
Oh.
That's where I think he messed up as well.
Oh,
These
mercy.
hillbilly cops, they'll never find that in this fire.
Right.
Burn it, throw some
Right.
tires on it, get that
Right.
blazing heat.
Right.
He said nothing burns hotter in the salvage yard than radial steel tires. Nothing burns hotter. And thought he'd get rid of it all, thought it'd all disappear. Remember, you helped do this too. Let's go.
Wow.
It's hard to imagine a more horrific ending to somebody's life than what Teresa Halbach experienced that day.
Oh, mercy.
Just the fact that the girl was sexually assaulted brutally, but then to actually set someone on fire and burn them. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It was the worst day of my life. This day, it still bothers me.
Wow.
Although the evidence pointed overwhelmingly to Stephen Avery and his nephew's guilt, a revealing documentary series turned the entire case on its head. And what's the shocking message Karl Wernecke has for his friend Stephen Avery today? In 2005, 2 years after Stephen Avery was exonerated for a rape he didn't commit, Teresa Halbach was murdered on his property. Avery had been charged and was awaiting trial.
If he would have, murdered the lady that wrongly convicted him the first time, I could cope with that inside of my criminal mind. If he would have done that, I could have accepted that criminally. It's unacceptable what he did. You don't go just kill people to kill somebody.
But according to Avery's nephew, Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. After raping, stabbing, and shooting Teresa, Brendan told authorities that they moved Teresa's SUV into the junkyard and that his uncle, quote, did some stuff under the hood. Touch DNA from Avery was later found on the hood latch. Then they covered the vehicle in debris. Finally, Avery removed Teresa's license plates, which were later located in another wrecked vehicle in the junkyard.
Wow.
Soon after confessing, Brendan Dassey recanted. He said he told the police what they wanted to hear. None of that happened. And in fact, he never saw Stephen kill Teresa, that he did not kill Teresa, and that the police basically made him say what he said.
We know there's some things you left out. We've been investigating this a long time. We pretty much know everything. All right, I'm just going to come up and ask you, who shot her in the head?
You did? Why didn't you tell us that? So I can think of it.
But when unprompted, Brendan revealed key pieces of evidence regarding how they cleaned up Teresa's blood with gasoline, paint thinner, and bleach.
What kind of cleaning? What do you do? How do you do it? They threw gas on so you could get it off. Then he tried paint thinner and then he went to bleach to get it off.
Well, that's pretty descriptive. Paint, thinner, bleach.
He went like he was spraying it like probably got on the floor and splashed up on the
gasoline.
Luminol tests of the garage confirmed the presence of paint thinner and bleach
Wow.
in the exact location Brendan described to officers.
Well, that must be
as
some
well
truth.
as bleach stains on the jeans Brendan wore the night of the murder.
And then remember that.
And a bullet fragment containing Teresa's blood was later discovered in the garage.
Okay.
After he's being told what's going to happen here, yeah, he probably would start recanting things and say, well, I didn't mean that. Well, it's too late.
4 months
Wow.
after Halbach's murder, authorities arrested Brendan Dassey as a co-conspirator. He was charged with being party to first-degree intentional homicide, sexual assault, and mutilating a corpse. Additional charges were levied against Avery, including kidnapping, false imprisonment, and sexual assault with a dangerous weapon.
You know, he was saying from the beginning, look, I was railroaded in the sexual assault case in 1985, and they're trying to pin this one on me too.
The trial of Stephen Avery for the murder of Teresa Halbach began on February 9th, 2007, and included 19 days of testimony from 59 witnesses. Brendan Dassey's taped confession was found not admissible. In March 2007, the Manitowoc County jury of 6 men and 6 women deliberated for nearly 22 hours over 3 days.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Stephen A. Avery, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
I think there was great relief when the verdict finally came back that the jury did not buy into the frame-up defense.
You know they had to say as a jury, we must make sure. This man's already done time for a crime he did not commit. I will not be part of a jury to send him back innocent again. I think they went above and beyond more than a jury would have to make sure to where, yep, he is guilty.
Avery was sentenced to life in prison with no chance for parole. A jury also found Dassey, who was 17 by then, guilty in the rape, murder, and mutilation of Halbach. Dassey was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 2048 after serving 41 years. Wow. Then on December 18th, 2015, Netflix released a 10-episode documentary about Stephen Avery titled Making a Murderer. It's the proclaimed real-life thriller about Stephen Avery, a DNA exoneree who found himself at the center of a murder investigation after attempting to expose the corrupt law enforcement that wrongfully imprisoned him 18 years earlier. The original series was viewed by over 19 million people. The discussion went viral on social media outlets. In 2018, Part 2 was released. Viewers became enraged at the idea that 2 innocent men could be serving life sentences based on the strong suggestion by the documentary that law enforcement planted and tampered with evidence to frame Avery in retaliation for his $36 million lawsuit against Manitowoc County.
They're going to do all this because he wants money from us? The sheriff made a great comment when he said, if we wanted him gone, he could have been gone. They could say Avery just up and took off, and they could make a body disappear. Why wouldn't they do that, like the sheriff said?
I mean, I give them a lot of credit. They put together a very compelling story. I mean, the story is compelling, but it's not the whole story.
I completely disagree with their agenda. I think there was so much left out of Making a Murder.
A lot of people, because of the series, are arguing this case in the court of public opinion, and that doesn't matter. They reached their verdict based on what they heard in the courtroom, not what was just presented in this 10-part series.
You have the defendant's blood in the victim's car. You have the victim's key to her car in the defendant's bedroom. And you have some bullet particles with the victim's DNA in the defendant's garage, which is exactly where his accomplice said that Stephen Avery shot the victim. So with that kind of evidence, this is kind of a prosecutor's dream case.
In addition to killing Teresa Halbach, Karl Wernecke believes that his former cellmate Stephen Avery also damaged the Innocence Project's noble cause.
Such a kick in the face for the people that really need that program. It's just, it makes no sense. It hurts so many people, the ripple effect from it. If he got a letter from me, I think it would make his day. Even believing he's 100% guilty in this, I do not hate him. I still consider him a friend of mine. The rest of his life, he will never, ever get help. He'll never be able to be in a mental hospital and get released. It's too far gone. He will carry that anger to his grave. He's an evil person that was created into a monster for something he didn't do. He feels no guilt. You can't live in society without guilt. So he's in the perfect spot.
Karl Wernecke. So the blood issue, the defendant's blood in the car, they show you that near the steering wheel. I think it's right where you put the key. I do believe that's the same blood that Mr. Avery and his attorneys felt was planted by detectives, because I can't remember if they had a vial of his blood, and there was some issue about that, about a vial of his blood, and that's how it became introduced into the case inside of her car. But I'm going to say this once again. If you scratch the defendant's blood, if you believe it was planted, you scratch the key found in the bedroom behind that little stand or dresser, you still cannot logically explain her remains found in a burn pit 20 feet from his door, his trailer. When he's the only one allegedly residing in the trailer, she's not known to frequent him outside of work. Been there a few times, did feel uncomfortable one time before actually going missing. The remains seals the deal. And that's the one thing you can't explain logically. Why her remains would be in that burn pit. Why is she missing? Why is her car covered up? So you can use those two if you can't use anything else. The RAV4 on the property and her remains in a burn pit. And she's nowhere to be found. So what would a tooth be doing in a burn pit alongside materialistic items also burnt, believing to have belonged to her? It is what it is. Brandon's role. Was he knowledgeable of what transpired on that day? Did he walk up and hear the girl hollering, screaming, peeping through, trying to see what the hell was going on, and then was invited to assault the lady and participate in her murder, kill her, and discard her body? Did he know right from wrong? Some would say he did. Even if you're developmentally slow, you still should know having sexual relations with a tied up person is wrong, number one. Number two, aiding in the death. Number three, helping to cover it up. Bleach on his pants, bleach, gasoline, paint thinner found in the spots in the garage where he said they were trying to get rid of evidence. But then one could flip it and say, well, he helped out after the fact. You also heard during his commentary that he told a relative that she was in the burn pile. The lady, her body was in there. And then one would say, why in the world would he do that if he sexually assaulted her, aided in killing her, and then helped cover her up? I don't know. You have to decide if his mental capacity had knowledge. That he was knowledgeable that he was doing wrong. And I'm sure people will argue that to the death. That whether you're developmentally slow, have a low IQ, you still should know not to touch and grope people inappropriately, whether it be a child or an adult. And you should know not to physically assault a person by a weapon, and also cover up their body, burn their body, hide their car. You're entitled to your opinion. Perhaps I'll do another live stream pertaining to Mr. Dassey if you believe he knew right from wrong. That will be my next poll I put up on my community page after this live stream. DNA exonerated Mr. Avery from his first crime of an alleged assault against a woman. Hairs were found to belong to another man who was a rapist at serving time. 60-year sentence. But did the incarceration of Mr. Avery for that said crime push him over the edge to become bitter, angry, demented, to hate women, to hate the system, to hate the law officials, and saying, when I get out, I'm going to get me a woman. This time, you thought I assaulted a woman, kidnapped a woman, raped a woman. Well, I'll show you I will, and I won't get caught. So he thought. Perhaps that's what he was pondering all those years locked up, watching all those shows, falling into La La Land, getting immersed into the TV, as you hear Mr. Karl say, that's all you had. TV watching you watching the TV. TV was serving your time for you. You can become immersed into TV, books, to where you become delusional and lose sight of reality. And perhaps that is what happened to Mr. Avery. He became immersed in his own anger, immersed in TV land, and he became a wrecking ball. But I do believe he already had sinister ways, because you don't torture animals, you do not expose yourself in public, and you do not chase a person down with a gun if you are mentally sound. So he was already unraveling before the first rape charge. But being inside tipped him all the way over. That's my commentary. Convicting of a murderer was released September 2023. I will try to find a way to watch it, to get the said information, and perhaps I will bring you commentary pertaining to that documentary. You're entitled to believe Mr. Avery committed this crime or not against Ms. Teresa Harvey. You're entitled to believe if Mr. Brendan participated and or if anybody else participated. You're entitled to believe that he was abusive to the girlfriend. We also have information that she says her relationship was staged for the documentary on Netflix. Very interesting information. Very interesting information. Staged how? Because if you didn't want to go along with participating in the documentary, you didn't have to. Was she paid? Was she coerced to say things about their relationship or the situation at hand that wasn't truthful? I don't know. But this is her assertion. Her version is that it was staged. Because it's been a while since I've seen the documentary on Netflix. So I'll have to go back and rewatch the commentary with her in it. But as I said, the one thing you can't denounce is the remains of the young lady in the burn pit. You can make up all you want about a place key in the room, his DNA being planted. But the one thing the detectives could not have placed would be the remains, because if you didn't know where she was, how could you plant that? You couldn't, because you didn't even know that she was in the burn pit. And that's the gist of the story. I want to thank you for joining me. Happy holidays to everybody. Please be safe and be aware of your surroundings this holiday season. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $McAngie, 129 Cash App. Stickers and chats are always welcome during the live stream. Thank you all for tuning in to this commentary. Please drop your comments below the video, the community page, take the polls, like, share, subscribe. And thank you for listening to the Vault Excel.